How about a Daimler?
And the closest you can get to a limousine on two wheels.
Hello and welcome to Top Gear. Later on, I'll be trying to persuade you to buy one of these, a Daimler SP250 Dart. It may look a lot like a design disaster with its guppy nose and finned rump, but it remains one of the most charismatic and the maddest car that Daimler ever built. It also has a secret, and I also have a confession, but more of that anon.
There's always been a link between British docks and Japanese cars. Before the 1960s, many of the cars on Japan's roads were dispatched from Britain's docks. A trickle of Japanese cars came back into those self-same docks in the 1960s to chuckles of derision from the British motor industry. But soon the trickle became a flood, and the British were forced to ask for a temporary gentleman's agreement limiting imports. It certainly saved the bacon of the British motor industry. Well, now the wheel has come to full circle, and once again there's lines of Japanese cars at the ports. But this time they're not awaiting customs clearance for entry to Britain. They're built in Britain and they're waiting for export to Europe. In December, the Toyota factory in Derbyshire came on stream with this car, which is the latest to join those lines at the dockside. It's the Carina E. E for excellence in Europe, they tell us, and exports will take 60% of production. The car features the familiar oily, smooth, flowing lines exhibited by most of the new crop of Japanese cars. Carina comes as a 5-door hatchback or as a 4-door saloon. They're both significantly bigger than the old model, not only longer and slightly wider, but also significantly higher, and that's good news for headroom. They paid a great deal of attention to airflow over the car and the way the panels meet. The result is a good CD figure and little wind noise at speed. Under the anonymous skin, there's some interesting technical stories. Now, you can choose from a range of 1.6 or 2-litre petrol engines. There's also a 2-litre diesel unit. But the most interesting engine is the 1.6 petrol fitted to the manual car. Now, Toyota describe it as one of the most advanced engines in the world. But aside from the specification, twin overhead camshafts, 16 valves, fuel injection, once exotic, but today almost commonplace, it's notable for being a lean burn unit. Now, when the industry was stampeded into fitting catalysts to clean up the exhaust systems, many of the engineers argued that they were being forced down the wrong road by the legislators. A catalysed engine uses more petrol and it emits more CO2 into the atmosphere. That's the greenhouse gas. Now, they argued that lean burn was a much better way to go. If you use less fuel, then you emit less CO2 and you put out fewer emissions. Trouble is, it's very difficult to get an engine to run smoothly when, in effect, you're starving it of fuel. Now, Toyota say they've cracked the problem by the use of sophisticated sensors and engine management systems. Up to 87 miles an hour on light to medium throttle, this unit runs as a lean burn engine, giving 10% better economy than a conventional engine. When you go over 87 or demand maximum power, it becomes a normal injected engine with a catalyst cleaning up the exhaust. Inside, it's pretty austere, with a nasty, shiny black plastic top to the dashboard that can reflect in the windscreen. It really wouldn't be a Japanese car without a superb RDS radio cassette stereo unit and a high level of equipment. There's power steering, power windows, mirrors, headlamp adjustment, and of course central locking. There's certainly more room in the car than the old model, but despite height and lumbar support adjustment on the driver's seat, it's quite uncomfortable over long distances. The rear seat passengers get more knee and foot space, the seat has a split fold, and it can be locked in position from the boot for better security. It's certainly a clinically efficient car. It handles and rides well, and it shows safe and secure road-holding qualities. Just it doesn't have a lot of soul. In their desire to make it completely acceptable to European markets and to the fleet operators, they seem to have ironed out individuality. Against its declared target cars of the Mondeo and the Cavalier, the Carina acquits itself well. Performance figures for this 1.6 in particular are impressive against the competition. At the end of the day, of course, the big question is, can the British screw these cars together with the same degree of quality and reliability as their Japanese counterparts? Well, Nissan's experience in Sunderland certainly suggests that the answer to that question is an emphatic yes.
In the last series, we did an item on car selling agencies and seemed to have caused a bit of a stir. They're a sort of automotive estate agents. You pay a fee up front to sell your car. Some of them even promise to sell it for you. Trouble is, you've been ringing and writing in telling us that some of these agencies haven't been doing that, and once you've paid the fee, usually 50 quid, you rarely hear another word. We have a file thick with complaints from viewers claiming they've been ripped off. And the police, the RAC and trading standards officers around the country also tell us they have files of complaints. The Office of Fair Trading has warned car sellers to be on their guard. We even had 2 calls from people who used to work for selling agencies and took a dim view of their employers. Our moles told us that their company's methods included the hard sell, empty promises about ready buyers, wild claims about advertising that never took place, and more seriously it transpired that these companies are tape recording your conversations in an attempt to make them into a legal and binding contract. Only some agencies use tape recording, but one that did is Motorlink. 6 of our complaints were about this particular company. Tracy Reed from Guildford had an unhappy experience with them. She was approached by them when she advertised her Fiesta XR2. She agreed on the phone to use their service, but didn't give them a credit card number, and they also promised her that she could cancel by the following morning if she wanted. After sleeping on the idea, Tracy reckoned that perhaps Motorlink wasn't the way to sell her car after all. Despite repeated attempts, she was unable to get through before the morning deadline, but she did get through later on in the day, but was told by Motorlink that she'd missed the cancellation deadline and would have to pay the £50 fee. Tracy wasn't too pleased about that. Motorlink then followed up Tracy's call with a letter. It said, when you registered your vehicle with Motorlink, the registration was tape recorded, and that unless we receive payment within 7 days of receiving this letter, then your file will be passed for litigation. Tapes of the conversations, it continued, would be produced as evidence. Tracy was sent letters of increasing severity, culminating in one which threatened legal action, complete with a very official-looking copy of a county court summons. 3.5 months and 7 letters later, Motorlink then wrote to Tracy saying they would settle for 20 quid. Tracy ignored the letter and has heard nothing since. Now, Liverpool Trading Standards officers want a mandatory 7-day cooling-off period for services sold by unsolicited phone calls, same as the legislation that exists for unsolicited callers on your doorstep. But for those of you who have paid a selling agency with a credit card, there is one ray of hope. Paul Whiffin of Essex was contacted by Vehicle Sales UK when he was advertising his Escort.
Vehicle Sales UK promised me that they had 2 interested buyers who wanted to see my car on the weekend. I agreed with them that should this not happen, then my Barclaycard bill would be ripped up and it would not appear on my statement. However, come Monday morning, obviously nothing had happened, and I then telephoned them in vain over the following week to get absolutely no response, together with a complete denial that such a refund would ever have been promised. So following that, I spoke to Barclaycard, who sent me a detailed questionnaire, and I filled that in, and they granted me a full refund.
Barclaycard say that when a merchant signs up for one of their cards, if the goods or services offered aren't up to the standard agreed between the merchant and the cardholder, then the money will be returned to the cardholder. Paul proved successfully to Barclaycard that he hadn't received the goods he was promised from his selling agency. And there's more good news. Berkshire Trading Standards have successfully prosecuted 2 individuals, Deborah Sheedy, trading as Vehicle Sales UK, and Mark Roebuck, trading as Information Marketing Services.
In the case of Information Marketing Services, they sent out invoices when all the customers asked for was information on the service. Consequently, they were prosecuted under the Unsolicited Goods and Services Act. In the case of Vehicle Sales UK, people were persuaded to part with their Barclaycard access numbers on the pretext that they had customers waiting in their area. When we examined the records of Vehicle Sales UK, they had no such prospective buyers in the customer's area at all. Consequently, they were prosecuted under the Trade Description Act.
What of the future for consumers with agencies like this?
We will continue to look at complaints, and if there are breaches of criminal legislation, we will prosecute. But as far as we are concerned, they are running a directory by running these databases, and in order to put entries onto directories and charge for it, there's got to be a note of agreement between the 2 parties. If there is no note of agreement, that is a criminal offence.
Now, we're not suggesting that all car selling agencies are dodgy, or saying that the amount of complaints we received form a large proportion of their customer base, but we have heard from some pretty outraged punters. It's common sense, really. If you're paying money up front for services you're supposed to receive later from some bloke you don't know, it pays to be a bit careful. Think very hard before agreeing to anything over the telephone, especially if it involves giving over your credit card number. And make sure that any promises you're given are put in writing.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This weekend sees the start of the Mobile 1 Top Gear British Rally Championship. We'll be covering all 5 rounds, starting with the Vauxhall Rally of Wales this weekend. You can keep up to date with the action by ringing our rally hotline on 0891 333 404. This is also the number to call if you'd like to enter our Top Gear Rally competition. The prize, a chance to spend a day behind the wheel of a car at one of Britain's top rally schools. All you have to do is identify the year in which all this took place.
I'm the urban spaceman, baby. I've got speed. I've got everything I need. I'm the urban spaceman, baby. I can fly. I'm a supersonic guy.
The number to ring again for the hotline and competition is 0891 333 404. We'll announce the winner and runners-up who get a model of a Jaguar XJ220 in our report on the Vauxhall Rally of Wales in a fortnight's time.
The Great Yorkshire Showground in Harrogate is more used to showing heavy horses than heavy horsepower. But last summer, it was home to the creme de la creme of motorcycling events. Britain's largest ever gathering of Honda Goldwings and their proud owners. This Grand Tour of Harrogate is the highlight of this 4-day jamboree for Goldwing owners. But I mustn't call it that because this is a treffen, and you may or may not know that that is German for a meeting of friends. Now, with all this exotica here, I wasn't really quite sure which machine to climb aboard. Nothing but the best of Top Gear, because as you can see, I've got 3 wheels on my wagon, and this is one of the first of this type exported to Europe. In fact, everything's on a big scale at this, the 12th National Treffen, organised by the Goldwing Owners Club of Great Britain. There are over 1,000 bikes, worth some 8 million quid, and characters drawn from all walks of life. Many are somewhat mature, drawn back by this grand form of motorcycling after years out of the saddle. The Honda Goldwing became the fastest and grandest Grand Tourer, a sort of luxury liner of the two-wheel world. It all started in 1972 when the idea was hatched in the fertile minds of some Japanese engineers in the southern town of Waco. And talking of Waco, there are 1 or 2 wacky things here, I can tell you. Mick, you've been around a bit.
Yes, all these places that we've been. With a bike like this, you've got to be able to use it. And a big bike like this, you can travel in comfort. At my age, I want to be able to do 300 or 400 miles a day. And this is a bike to do it with.
What would this whole outfit be worth?
I should think it's the rough estimate over £19,000 now, with the trailer and all the extra work on it and all the what we call goodies.
And what about you with your decorated shirt and things?
Well, it's all part of the club scene. You know, we all like to dress up. You know, all Goldwingers really are posers at heart.
The Wing first hit the showrooms in 1975 as the svelte, bare-chested GL1000. But in no time, it sprouted accessories and the fully dressed tourer appeared, the Aspencade, gold knobs and all. And manufacturing was transferred to the ideal home of this interstate cruiser, Maryland in the United States. Of course, a big bike needs a big engine. And the Wing's engine just gets bigger and bigger as the technological wizardry gets more and more sophisticated. This is the most recent Goldwing GL1500, and it's got everything on it except the kitchen sink. It's got a 1520cc flat 6-cylinder engine. It's also got its own adjustable suspension activated by this onboard computer, so it can go up and down depending upon the weight of your pillion passenger or the road surface. It's got fully integrated disc brakes, 2 on the front and 1 on the rear. It's got a super-duper radio cassette system with the volume controlled by a computer on the speedometer. It's got electronic cruise control, it's got a heater, and it's got illuminated hand switches. In fact, I wouldn't mind half of these things on my car. And to avoid those hernias pushing it round the car park, you can select reverse. How often do you use reverse gear?
Not very often. With your legs being so long, you don't really need it, but it gets you out of trouble.
It must be very cumbersome riding a thing of this size.
No, it's not that bad. The centre of gravity is very low, so it keeps it upright. It's very balanced.
So you don't fall over too often?
No.
Why do you ride a bike like this?
Well, I used to have a sports bike, but I kept getting stopped for speeding, so I thought it was time to change.
I see. Every Goldwing's an expression of the rider's personality, like a front room on wheels. Owners vie with each other to enhance their bikes. Depending on what you want, you could lash out anything from 2 to 10,000 on a radio here, a potted plant there. In fact, everything's available from rain covers to trailers, from tents to exotic paint.
There's thousands of items, you know, for all the range of Goldwings. You know, you've got light bars, you've got mud flaps, you've got crazy eagles that go on front fenders. Then you've got the bizarre, like a bike boy holder, which holds a can of drink on the handlebars. So, you know, it just goes on and on, everything.
Why do people buy these accessories?
Well, they make the bikes a bit more comfortable and they compete with each other for the looks of them.
The Goldwing movement goes from strength to strength, with local events called wingdings as well as treffens. But there's still got to go some to match the sheer glamour of Harley-Davidson's factory-supported hog rallies. And as the highly individualistic Harley riders say, they'd rather eat worms than ride a Honda. Ah, hello, Fred. You're the chairman of the Goldwing Owners Club of Great Britain. How's the movement grown over here?
It's fantastic. I've been chairman now for 5 years, and it's trebled in size in that 5 years. Since it was formed in 1980 with 300 and so members, we're now approaching 3,000 members in the UK, something like 14,000 in the European Federation, and with our friends in America, could be up to 80,000. It's an incredible movement.
Biking's comfort-conscious brothers and sisters came to Harrogate from as far afield as Belgium, Holland, Germany and Switzerland. A few even came from the States. It was a relaxing weekend and they needed it. After a long ride, it wouldn't be long before they'd saddle up again and take on another Treffham in another town somewhere in Europe.
There are old cars and old cars. Some simply expire, giving up the unequal struggle. They pass the way of all flesh, reduced to their component parts, and are melted down to make new ones. Others, the non-mass-produced variety, better built and more prestigious, are less perishable, less vulnerable to the ravages of time. Their breeding spares them from such an ignominious fate. But there are a handful that last longer than most. And this little beastie happens to be one of them. No matter what you think about its styling, the Daimler Dart or SP250, to give it its proper title, makes a seriously sensible old car. What gives the Dart its longevity and high survival rate is its fiberglass body, which means zero rust. There's a massive fourth road bridge chassis and a turbine-like V8 engine capable of up to 30 miles per gallon. In other words, it's as tough as Doc Martens with piffling ownership and restoration costs. But the main reason for buying a Daimler Dart sounds like this. The 2.5 V8 Edward Turner designed power unit is the Dart's tour de force and an absolute lulu. If anything, it's too fast for the rest of the car. Launched in 1959 at the New York Motor Show, the Dart was aimed at the lucrative American sports car market, hence those fashionable transatlantic fins. Dodge had already trademarked the name Dart, so Daimler had to climb down and call it the SP250 instead. If the Daimler Dart has a claim to fame, it's the car that sunk Daimler. The car-crazy Americans weren't impressed, and only 2,400 found enlightened owners. The SP250 was desperately outgunned by the likes of the Big Healy and the Jaguar E-Type. In 1960, Jaguar bought out the ailing Daimler company and axed the sportiest car that Daimler had ever built in 1964. But for you and me, those low production numbers are good news because they make the Dart rare and separate. Most of the cars went to America, so there can't be more than a few hundred left in the UK. When's the last time you saw one? And it's because they come onto the market so infrequently that prices have always been buoyant. In fact, the Daimler Dart is one of the few classics that hasn't slumped in value. But they are still affordable. Only last month, I watched a perfectly respectable, taxed and tested Dart make £4,500 at a classic car auction. In the boom, Darts like this would make £16,000, £17,000. Now they're down to around 11 or 12. So what about the spares situation on a car that's been out of production for 30 years? Are all those twiddly chrome bits still available?
Well, there's no problem on the parts. Nobody need to be scared of buying a Daimler Dart. Parts availability is as good as it was back in 1964. There's probably only 2 or 3 things we haven't got, but we could always find a very good second-hand part. As parts have become obsolete, we've remanufactured them, and John's here making petrol tanks at the moment, and we make the sills. That's really the only part of them that rots. We make the grille surround, the mesh, the V, the rear lamp surrounds. We make the chrome that goes on top of the doors and the window guides. We make a lot of the pretty chrome parts. We do the exhaust system, which is about £130, and that's not dear because a modern car would cost probably more than that. A set of hoses to keep the car going, that's only about £30. Exchange water pumps, radiators, discs, pads for the brakes, they're only about £15. Discs are £30. So nothing is that expensive. The idea is to keep the car on the road.
But what's it like to drive? From its Stone Age cart spring suspension, heavy worm and peg steering, to a body that flexes on fast corners, the Dart is mechanically prehistoric. But it's exactly that splendid vintage feel which makes it such an enjoyable and hairy handful.
When I first saw the Dart at the 1959 Motor Show, I fell in love with it then. I thought it was wonderful, the shape of it, the 2+2 seating. And in 1964, when I could afford to buy one, I went out and got it. I loved the big V8 engine, the wind-up windows, the fiberglass bodies that didn't rust, and the big chassis, and the whole car was just wonderful.
But watch the handling. Treat the loud pedal roughly, and the back end will soon be overtaking the front. It's at this point I must come clean. I must make my confession. It's hard for me to be detached, to be objective about Daimler Darts, because I've owned one since 1976. I'll never sell it. I'll be buried in it. To me, Daimler Darts are like Catherine Deneuve dipped in chocolate sauce. So if you want an old mad car to keep forever, then this is it. A slip of the designer's pencil, a drastic plastic roller skate. The Dart may look a lot like the man from Atlantis, but I guarantee that you'll feel better at the end of your journey than when you started. And when it comes to classic cars, surely that's what it's all about.
Next week, Janet Trewin on the dangers of being a dozy driver. Jeremy Clarkson testing Jeep's Cherokee and Ford's Explorer. And Tiffany Dell tries the leading contenders in the British Touring Car Championship.